The night felt alive, made of wind and fear. Heavy rain washed the road as Sophia ran, clutching her small suitcase, her heart burning. Behind her, her ex's headlights tore through the darkness like teeth ready to bite. The asphalt shimmered like shattered glass, and every step was a scream the world pretended not to hear. The wind pulled at her dress, the mud clung to her feet, and fear whispered that there was no way out. Then, between thunder and despair, another sound broke the silence. A deep, slow engine, like a warning. A black car stopped in front of her, and from it stepped a man in a dark suit, his gaze a mix of calm and danger. Rain surrounded them like a curtain. He didn't ask anything, he just said, in a low voice, "Get in. It's not safe out here." And in that moment, she didn't know if she was being saved or condemned. The car sped off, and the world seemed to bend around that unlikely encounter. Sometimes destiny doesn't come with angels, it comes with a man carrying a broken heart and a dark past. And what begins as an escape can become the most dangerous kind of love. The road seemed endless. The soaked asphalt reflected the glare of headlights, as if the night itself was crying with her. Sophia Rinaldi ran with a small suitcase and a shattered heart. Every step was a silent scream against everything she'd lost. The rain poured down, mixing with tears that no longer knew where they ended. Behind her, the growl of an engine sliced through the storm like a living threat. Ricardo's car light slashed the darkness in two furious beams. The man who once promised love was now the hunter. The hiss of tires against the water sounded like a clock counting down to the inevitable. Sophia stumbled, slipped, tried to hide, but the road offered no shelter. The wind blew like punishment. Her dress clung to her skin. The mud rose up her legs. Fear throbbed in her chest like a second heartbeat. She tried to run, but her body begged for mercy. She looked back. The headlights were closer now, fierce and merciless, like a beast's eyes in the storm. Then, between one flash of lightning and the next, a new light appeared. Another car, coming from the opposite direction. Smaller, quieter, almost ghost-like. Her heart stopped for a second, unsure if this was salvation or the end. The vehicle slowed down carefully, gliding to a halt a few meters ahead. The door opened. Out stepped a man in a dark suit, his face half hidden by the rain, but his eyes were steady, calm in a way that felt dangerous. Dante Marino. A name whispered in Sicilian alleys. The man many feared but few had ever seen. Sophia took a step back, breathless. Her voice trembled as she tried to explain, but Dante just watched, expressionless, until he finally said with quiet authority, "Get in. It's not safe here." There was no threat in his tone, but no choice either. It was an order, spoken softly, with a strange hint of compassion. She hesitated. But when Ricardo's engine roared again in the distance, instinct crushed pride. She ran toward Dante's car and climbed in. The leather seat was warm. The air thick with a woodsy scent and tension. The door closed, and the outside world vanished. The car moved forward in silence, cutting through the rain. Sophia trembled, watching droplets slide down the glass. Dante's eyes stayed on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. He spoke only once. "Who's after you?" His voice was low, as if not to disturb the sound of the storm. She took a deep breath. The name came out like a wound. Ricardo. Dante didn't react. He just pressed the accelerator, and the car picked up speed, gliding through the night like a living shadow. In the rearview mirror, the hunter's headlights sliced through the rain. Unaware of the car that had been there moments before. For a moment, Sophia thought she was dreaming, that this man, cold eyes, quiet words, couldn't be real, but the silence between them said otherwise. It was a heavy, protective silence, as if Dante carried a promise he didn't know how to explain. The road stretched on, empty. The trees swayed under the wind. The rain blurred the windshield into a curtain of grey. Dante drove with precision, steering through curves and puddles like someone who'd memorized every turn. Everything about him radiated control. Everything about her fear and fragile hope. She held the suitcase tightly, as if it carried more than clothes and papers. It carried memories and guilt, Dante noticed, but said nothing. He just turned on the heater, and warm air filled the car, wrapping the silence in an almost human comfort. Sophia glanced at him, searching for meaning. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked. Dante didn't answer. He switched to the high beams and looked away, as if mystery was safer than truth. There was something in him that didn't match the rumors, something restrained, maybe wounded. They drove for miles without a word. Then faintly, a siren wailed somewhere far behind. Sophia shrank into her seat, tears glimmering. "They'll never stop," she whispered. Dante turned to her for the first time. "Every hunter gets tired eventually, or becomes the hunted." The words lingered in the air like a vow. A shiver ran down her spine. He wasn't talking about Ricardo, he was talking about himself. Both of them carried ghosts that refused to die. The car turned onto a dirt road, almost hidden beneath the rain. The storm began to ease. The hum of the engine merged with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Neither of them spoke, but each stolen glance said what words couldn't. He was danger. She was escape. And together, they were something fate hadn't named yet. The car finally stopped. The road ended at the base of a hill covered in pine trees. Dante turned off the engine and let the silence fill the space. "You're safe now," he said without looking at her. "For now." Sophia leaned her head against the window, exhausted. It's okay. Outside, the rain began to fall again slow, steady, like the night itself was breathing with them. There were no more engines behind them, no lights in the mirror, only the wind's whisper and his presence. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something she couldn't name. Maybe it was peace, or maybe the warning of something far more dangerous. The road ended there, but between fear and refuge, the first spark of a forbidden love began to burn. The night stretched endlessly ahead. The sound of the engine filled the silence, steady, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Dante Marino kept his eyes on the horizon, hands unmoving on the wheel. As the world outside dissolved into rain and mist, inside the car the air was thick, a mix of fear, perfume, and fate. Sophia watched his reflection in the glass, trying to understand the man who, in just minutes, had changed the course of her life. The low hum of the engine felt like it obeyed only his will. Every move was measured, every breath deliberate. Sophia could sense the kind of power Dante carried, a quiet power that didn't need to prove itself. She wanted to thank him, but words felt too small in the presence of a man like him. So she just watched, feeling the strange contrast between the warm air blowing from the vents and the cold still clinging to her skin. Dante glanced at her hands gripping the suitcase. He didn't say a word, just turned up the heat and looked back at the road. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of unspoken questions and answers that might never come. Sophia sensed it too, and decided to save what little strength she had left to figure out where she was heading. After a few minutes, Dante finally spoke. His voice was deep, quiet, carrying a faint accent that sounded like it had lived through centuries. "Who's hunting you?" he asked, eyes never leaving the road. The question was simple, but it filled the air with weight. Sophia took a slow breath before answering, her voice trembling. "My ex-fiancé, he's a cop, and a corrupt one." The word cop made Dante's expression tightened, not out of fear, but calculation. He knew what it meant to cross paths with men like that. As for a moment, he didn't reply. The hum of the tires became a live wire of tension. "And what did you do to make him want you dead?" he asked calmly. Sophia turned her face to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. "I tried to do the right thing." Dante exhaled softly. "The right thing always comes with a price." She looked at him, unsure whether to hear contempt or understanding in his tone. But all she saw was control, a man who had lived too long to let himself feel. Still, buried in his voice, there was something, an echo of empathy beneath layers of steel. The road opened ahead like a tunnel of mist and trees. The headlights cut through the darkness with surgical precision. Sophia began to relax little by little, realizing the immediate danger had passed, but the unknown still loomed. Dante noticed and, without looking at her, said, "You don't have to trust me. You just have to stay alive until morning." The words echoed in her mind like a vow, the kind that feels less like a promise and more like fate. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the constant rhythm of the rain, and imagined the car as a moving shelter, fragile but real. Weariness weighed on her shoulders as she leaned her head back. Dante glanced at her, and for a fleeting second, something in his expression softened. When she finally fell asleep, he slowed the car. The night belonged only to them now, the fugitive and the man who had turned danger into routine. Dante thought about leaving her somewhere safe, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she still fought to breathe, even in her exhaustion. Or maybe it was a feeling, a warning he trusted more than any map. A memory flickered through his mind, a woman he'd lost years ago. A face forgotten by the city but still alive in his silence. He forced the thought away, jaw tightening as he turned back to the road. "Don't make old mistakes," he muttered to himself. But the night heard him, and the rain answered with a distant roll of thunder. Hours passed before the light of a cabin appeared on the hill. Dante stopped the car and stared for a moment before waking her. "We're here," he said. Not gently, but not coldly either. Sophia stirred, disoriented, eyes wide as if waking from a nightmare. "Where are we?" she asked. He simply replied, "Somewhere no one will find you." She hesitated before stepping out, looking at the dark mountains and the thin smoke rising from a distant chimney. The air was sharp and cold, but the place carried a strange sense of safety. Dante grabbed a flashlight and opened the cabin door, the motion firm. Practice like he'd done it 100 times before. Inside, the space was simple, but lived in. A blanket over the couch, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, a map spread across the table. Sophia looked around cautiously. "You live here?" she asked. He answered without turning around sometimes. The words sounded like a secret he didn't want to share. She sat down slowly, her body still trembling. Dante took off his coat and placed it over her shoulders. The gesture was quick, subtle, but heavy with meaning. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you can decide if you want to keep running." His tone was neutral, but there was something in it, a thin line between command and care. Sophia watched as he walked to the window and lit a cigarette. The smoke curled into the faint mist outside, mixing with the sound of the rain against the glass. There was something sorrowful about him, something time hadn't managed to erase. Dante didn't look at her, but his silence revealed the battle inside him. As if helping someone was a sin he was about to commit all over again. She wanted to ask who he really was, but exhaustion won. She lay down on the couch, wrapped in his coat, and let sleep take her. Before drifting off, she heard only the faint click of a lighter closing and the sound of steady breathing. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the silence felt almost human. Sophia slept, while Dante watched the darkness through the window. The world seemed suspended, as if waiting for his next move. And when her eyes finally closed completely, he whispered to himself, a quiet vow. "You're under my protection now." The cigarette's ember faded, and fate, once again, changed its course. The mountains still breathed with the remains of the night. The rain had slowed, but the cold lingered, slipping through the cracks of the cabin like an old ghost. Sophia woke slowly, feeling the weight of Dante's coat over her shoulders. The fabric still held his warmth, the scent of wood and faint smoke. For a brief moment she forgot her fear, listening only to the wind and the crackle of fire beginning to grow in the hearth. Dante was there, seated at the table, elbows resting, eyes fixed on a map. The firelight carved shadows across his face, a balance between man and mystery. Sophia watched him in silence, unsure if she should trust him. He seemed too calm for someone used to running, calm like a man who'd learned to master chaos. "You slept through the night," he said without looking up, as if he already knew she was awake. His rough voice carried a strange comfort. Sophia sat up, adjusting the coat. I don't think I've slept like that in months. Dante gave a short nod, wordless. He stood, walked to the stove and poured coffee into 2 iron mugs. The soft sound of liquid broke the silence, and for a fleeting second the cabin almost felt normal. She thanked him with a shy nod, unable to hold his gaze for long. Dante leaned against the table and spoke quietly. It'll rain all day, he said. You should stay here. Sophia nodded. Part of her wanted to run, but another part knew there was nowhere left to go. The road was far, and the past far too close. Outside, armed men moved between the trees. They weren't police, they were his. Silent sentinels. Shadows bound by loyalty. Sophia caught their figures through the window and felt the weight of the choice she'd made. You're with the Mafia, aren't you? She asked, her voice trembling between fear and certainty. Dante didn't answer right away. I'm what the world forced me to become. The words hung in the air, slicing the distance between them. Sophia gripped the mug tightly, the heat burning her palms. And what will you force me to become? He looked toward the fire as if searching for an answer in the flames. Nothing. The choice is yours. But while you're here, no one touches you. Something in her faltered. It was hard to balance fear with the strange sense of safety his presence carried. He was danger, but also shelter. A paradox the heart understood long before reason. Sophia took a deep breath, the scent of wet earth drifting through the half-open window. Dante grabbed a coat from the wall and threw it over his shoulders. I have something to take care of. Stay inside. And if you hear anything, don't go out. She wanted to ask where he was going, but his look was enough, both a warning and a promise. The sound of the door closing seemed to echo inside her chest. Left alone, Sophia wandered around the cabin. Traces of a secret life hid in every corner. Old books. A faded photograph of a woman with a young boy, a broken watch resting on a shelf. Every object seemed to hold a story she wasn't yet allowed to hear. She touched the frame gently and felt a pang of guilt for invading his silence. The day passed slowly. The rain turned to fog and birds began to sing again, softly. Sophia looked out and saw 2 men talking near the car in low voices. One had a gun tucked under his coat. She stepped back, her pulse quickening. This wasn't a refuge, it was a border. One wrong move, and hell would reopen. When Dante returned, the floor seemed to recognize his steps. He entered, removed his coat, and for a brief moment their eyes met. Sophia couldn't hold back the question, Do you trust those men? He answered with calm precision, enough to keep them away from you. The words felt like protection and a threat. He walked to the map, traced something with his finger, and spoke without looking at her. Ricardo's being hunted, and not just by me. Sophia's eyes widened. You had him investigated. Dante looked up, his gaze steady, dangerous in its calm. No one hunts what's mine and walks away unscathed. The words were simple, but carried the weight of a verdict. A chill spread through her veins. She didn't know what frightened her more, Ricardo, or the man who now claimed to protect her. The line between salvation and danger was blurring fast. She wanted to thank him, but her voice failed. She only nodded, and Dante seemed to understand. Rest, he said. Tomorrow we decide what comes next. The day faded slowly, painting the sky in shades of gold and grey. Inside, the fire burned low. Sophia watched the flames dance, thinking about fate, how it could wear the mask of disaster and still look like a miracle. Her heart was a battlefield, torn between instinct and desire. When night returned, Dante was still by the window, the firelight casting his face in amber and shadow. His gaze was distant, fixed on something beyond the mountains. Sophia watched him quietly, realizing that somehow he too was running from something. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Sophia pulled his coat tighter and curled up on the couch. Outside, thunder rolled through the sky. Inside, only the sound of a slow heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know if she was trapped or safe. The night moved slowly, every second pulling them closer to something inevitable. The refuge wasn't a shelter, it was a mirror. And what it reflected now was the beginning of something neither guilt nor fear could erase. Dawn crept in, painting the sky in pale shades of gold and grey. Mist crawled between the trees, as if hiding ancient secrets. Inside the cabin, the smell of coffee mixed with damp wood. Sophia woke to the sound of Dante's footsteps. He moved with quiet precision, like someone who'd learned that noise could mean death. She watched him silently, her body still heavy with exhaustion. Dante laid out documents on the table, scribbling quick notes, speaking softly in Italian over the phone. His tone was sharp, full of command and urgency. When he finished, he hung up and turned to face her. "You have powerful enemies, Sophia." His voice was steady, but beneath it was something else. Maybe a concern he didn't want to admit. Sophia rose slowly, still clutching his coat around her. "They won't stop," she said. "Ricardo's obsessed. He'd rather see me dead than admit he lost." Dante studied her for a moment that felt longer than it should have. Men like that don't lose until someone makes them fall. His words cut through the room like a cold verdict. She stepped closer, cautious. "You're going after him, aren't you?" He looked away. "Not yet. First, I need to understand why he'd risk everything for you." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "Because he can't stand that I got away." Dante didn't move. He just watched her, as if searching for something she couldn't see in herself. The hours dragged on. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the wind still carried the scent of the storm. Dante worked in silence, typing names into his laptop, while Sophia watched. The sound of the keys was like muffled gunfire. Riccardo Neri, he read quietly. "Detective, Financial Crimes Division. 2 investigations closed early. 1 accusation of misconduct. And a missing file 4 months ago." Sophia's knees went weak. That file. It was mine. Dante looked up, surprised for the first time. "You had evidence against him." She nodded, tears welling. "I kept everything. Transfers, recordings, even the report he tried to delete. But he found out. And since then, I've been running." Dante closed the laptop slowly. The click of the latch sounded final. "And where's the evidence now?" She hesitated, taking a breath. "On a flash drive, hidden inside my mother's photo frame. It's in the old house." The silence that followed was heavy. Dante leaned against the table, thinking, he'll go after it. It's only a matter of time. Sophia walked to the window, staring at the foggy horizon. "Do you really think it's worth fighting him?" she asked. Dante didn't hesitate. "It's always worth fighting fear." His dry tone carried the weight of someone who'd already lost everything and kept going anyway. She looked at him sideways. "You talk like someone who knows what loss feels like." Dante gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Loss is what keeps me alive." He sat back down and lit a cigarette. The smoke rose slowly, tracing invisible lines in the air, memories she couldn't see but somehow felt. She sensed there were wounds there but didn't ask. The tension softened a little when the fire in the hearth crackled louder. Sophia sat near the flames, the warmth brushing her face. Dante watched her in silence, the cigarette between his fingers. "Do you still believe in justice?" he asked suddenly. She thought for a moment. "I believe in regret. Justice usually comes too late." He exhaled smoke, eyes fixed on the fire. "I've seen many try to make things right. Few ever did." Sophia looked at him firmly, unafraid. Maybe because no one believed in them enough. Dante turned his gaze away, and for the first time, a faint smile crossed his face, small, almost hidden, but real. The shrill ring of a phone shattered the moment. Dante answered, his tone turning cold again. "Find everything you can on Riccardo Neri," he ordered. It wasn't a request. When he hung up, his eyes met hers. If he's hiding something, I'll find it. Sophia's heart pounded. You're getting too involved. Dante stepped closer. Slow, deliberate, stopping just a breath away. Maybe I've been involved since the moment I stopped that car. The air between them grew dense, charged with something neither of them dared to name. Sophia tried to steady her voice. This is dangerous. Dante didn't blink. Everything worth it is. A gust of wind rattled the window, and for an instant their reflections merged, two shadows caught in the same fate. Sophia looked away, startled by her own heartbeat. You don't understand, she whispered. I bring bad luck. Wherever I go, something terrible happens. Dante's voice was calm. Then I'd better not leave. She wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His breath was close, his gaze unyielding, and the space between fear and desire vanished with each second. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and Sophia realized this man was more dangerous than any pursuer, because he made her feel alive. But outside the night was already shifting. A shadow approached along the muddy road, footsteps soft against the ground. Dante sensed it before any sound confirmed it. He put out his cigarette, moved to the door, and stared into the dark. They came earlier than expected, he muttered. Sophia didn't understand, but his tone was enough to freeze her blood. The past had found its way back to them, and this time it wasn't coming alone. Morning broke heavy, the sky painted in smoke and grey. The cold crept through the cabin's cracks, and Sophia couldn't tell if it was the wind or fear making her shiver. Dante stood by the window, watching the world like a man searching for signs. The silence between them had a life of its own, dense, growing, carrying something neither of them dared to name. In the days that followed, a rhythm took shape. Dante taught her how to shoot, drive, and fight. The training was harsh, but the way he moved made every motion feel like a kind of dance. Sophia missed on purpose sometimes just to hear his voice, low, steady, too close to her ears, again, and she obeyed. The brief touch of his hands lingered long after the night fell. At first, she thought it was only gratitude. Then she realized her body was betraying reason. There was something in the way he walked, the way he held a gun, the way he looked at the horizon before speaking. A mystery that asked for no explanation. When he smiled, the rare, fleeting kind of smile that slipped through his arm, Sophia felt the world slow down, as if everything could start over right there. Dante pretended not to notice. He stayed in control, as if every emotion were an enemy to be defeated. But sometimes, when his gaze lingered too long, there was fire in it, a desire trying to disguise itself as protection. At night, when the fire in the hearth burned low, their reflections met in the flames, and neither of them looked away first. She began helping him with small things, sorting papers, brewing coffee, cleaning the weapons. And without realizing it, she began caring for him too. A blanket left on the couch, a warm plate forgotten on the table. Dante noticed, but said nothing. He just let her gestures speak the words neither of them dared to say. One afternoon he called her outside. The sky was heavy, the wind rolling down from the mountains. Dante handed her a gun and said only aim, but never hesitate. Sophia obeyed, her finger steady on the trigger. The shot echoed through the pines, and for a moment the sound seemed to free something inside her. When she turned, Dante was already watching, his gaze intense, proud, but silent. It was then she understood. He was changing her. And somehow, she was changing him too. Fear was making room for courage. The past still haunted her, but Dante showed her that surviving was also a way of fighting back. That night, as they cleaned the gun side by side, their fingers brushed by accident. Neither pulled away. Time in the cabin stopped being measured in days. It was counted in glances, pauses, shared breaths. The sound of rain became the soundtrack of everything left unsaid. Sophia found herself smiling again, and Dante, without admitting it, began to relax. There was something human in her presence. Something that reminded him of the man he had been before the war, before the blood. One night, as she told fragments of her past, Dante listened quietly. When she spoke of Riccardo and the life she had lost, her voice broke. He reached for her hand and said softly, "No one should carry that much alone." The words were simple, but they felt like a vow. Sofia cried for the first time without fear, and Dante stayed beside her, silent, steady, not trying to fix anything. In the days that followed, he began teaching her how to drive the clan's cars. Sofia laughed at her own mistakes, and he laughed too, a deep, forgotten laugh that carried a trace of the man he once was. Every turn of the wheel was no longer an escape, but a step towards something new. She was no longer the woman running down the road in panic. She was someone learning to stand her ground. But the stronger she became, the more Dante withdrew. What grew between them scared him in ways he couldn't admit. At night, he stared into the fire and saw her reflection there, a memory he could never claim. He had sworn never to get involved again, never to love again, but his heart, defiant as ever, was already betraying him. Sofia noticed his absences, the way he avoided her eyes for too long, the way he disappeared for hours, returning with rain on his coat and distance in his gaze. She wanted to resent his silence, but every time he came back, tired, soaked, wordless, that feeling dissolved into something deeper, somewhere between ache and tenderness. One evening, they sat before the fireplace without saying a word. The fire crackled, wood breaking into embers. Sofia thought about reaching for his hand, but stopped herself. Dante closed his eyes, weary. And in that silence she knew without a word that he felt the same. That love was there, even if it hid behind duty. The sin was born out of that silence. Not the sin of the flesh, but of wanting the impossible. Sofia knew his world was made of shadows, and hers of scars, yet her heart refused to listen. Love born from fear has its own dangerous beauty. It burns and freezes at the same time, and they were already burning. One night, a storm swept over the mountain. The power went out, and the fire was their only light. Sofia leaned closer, trying to stir the flame, and Dante joined her. Their hands met over the wood. For an instant, time stopped. Neither of them moved. And when she looked up, she saw in his eyes what his lips would never dare to say. He stepped back first, as if fleeing from himself. Grabbing his coat, he walked out into the rain and stood there, motionless, facing the sky. Sofia watched from the window, the stillness of his body, the weight in his stance. And she understood. Love isn't always a refuge. Sometimes it's the sweetest punishment. The following days were filled with silence and tension. They pretended nothing had changed, but everything had. The air between them was charged, ready to ignite at the slightest touch. Sofia watched him, trying to read what hid behind his restraint. Dante avoided anything that could remind him of what he felt, and the more he tried, the deeper he sank. At night, she saw him from afar, cleaning weapons, managing clan affairs. And in every movement, in every pause, something in him whispered, "I can't, but I want to." Sofia understood. Her heart said the same. The sin now had a name, a face, and both of them were trapped in it. In that lonely cabin, between storms and silence, something was born that neither time nor fear nor the past could ever erase. It was love, and it was danger, but it was real. The afternoon hung heavy, the sky thick with clouds as dark as molten iron. Wind swept down from the mountains, carrying a warning for something yet unnamed. Dante drove in silence, eyes fixed on the road winding between the hills. Sofia sat beside him, watching the grey horizon move with them. For hours, the sound of the tires was the only conversation between the two. She tried to hide her unease, but her body betrayed her. Her hands twisted in her lap, her gaze avoiding the rearview mirror. Ever since that night, when they almost touched, something had changed. The air between them carried a sweet, dangerous tension, and even silence had weight. Dante seemed to be fighting his own fate, as if driving was the only way to keep breathing. The rain began softly, tiny drops spreading across the glass. The sound was hypnotic. Sophia leaned her head back, closing her eyes for a moment, allowing herself a thought that scared her. Maybe there, in that car, she was finally safe. But peace, as she'd learned, was often the prelude to tragedy. The headlights of a truck appeared suddenly on the curve ahead. Dante instinctively slowed down. The vehicle was moving slowly, but it was taking up both lanes. Something was wrong. His grip on the wheel tightened, eyes narrowing. "Hold on," he said quietly, without looking at her. Sophia straightened up, her heartbeat quickening. The truck stopped abruptly, blocking the entire road. The rain thickened. Dante hit the brakes, but there was nowhere to go. The sound that came next wasn't thunder, it was the first gunshot. The side window shattered, scattering glass across the dashboard. Sophia screamed, but Dante was already moving, his body over hers, his gun drawn. More shots. The sound echoed through the mountains, merging with the storm. Dante slammed the gear shift into reverse, the tires spinning in the mud. "Get down!" he ordered. Sophia obeyed, her heart pounding louder than the bullets. The truck doors swung open and armed shadows stepped into the downpour. Dante turned the wheel sharply, the car skidding to the side as he accelerated along the edge of the road, the engine roaring in desperation. The bumper scraped against rocks, but he didn't slow down. The lights of their pursuers multiplied behind them. Sophia trembled, clutching the seat, her voice breaking through the chaos. "Are they Ricardo's men?" she shouted. "They belong to someone who wants the same ending," Dante replied, tense. The road narrowed, twisting into a blind curve. Dante spun the wheel. The car slid and nearly flipped. Sophia felt the world tilt, the smell of gasoline mixing with fear. When they finally stopped, they were on a dirt path leading to an abandoned village. The sound of engines still echoed behind them, but fading. "Out," Dante said. "Now." They ran through the rain. Their footsteps splashed in the mud. Thunder rolled over their heads. Sophia stumbled and Dante caught her by the waist, pulling her upright. For a moment, they were too close, breathing the same air, sharing the same panic. "Don't let go," she whispered. He didn't. They found shelter in an old church, its doors groaning under the weight of time. The roof was half collapsed, but the altar still stood. The air smelled of wet stone and old candles. Dante shoved a bench against the entrance and dropped his bag to the ground. Sophia fell to her knees, exhausted. "This will never end," she murmured. He walked toward her, rain and gunpowder still on his face. "It will," he said quietly. "I promise." His voice wasn't cold, it was wounded. Sophia lifted her eyes and saw the man behind the myth, not the Mafia boss, but someone carrying too much weight. Dante sat beside her, and silence filled the space like an ancient prayer. The storm pounded against the broken stained glass, painting the floor with trembling colors. Sophia watched the light dance and thought about how danger could look beautiful. Dante stared at the altar, his voice breaking through the quiet. "I lost someone here." She turned to him, startled. "Here," he nodded. "Years ago." Before all this, the confession hung in the air like an open wound. Sophia didn't need to ask who it was. The way he pressed a hand to his chest said everything. There was love there. Love time had failed to bury. He sighed, weary. "I swore I'd never let anyone in again." Sophia moved closer, sitting in front of him. "Then why did you save me?" Dante looked at her like a man searching for an answer inside a labyrinth, because sometimes destiny repeats itself, until we have the courage to change the ending. The words fell between them like both a prayer and a curse. She reached out, touching his face. His skin was warm, his eyes vulnerable, the silence between them alive with meaning. "Then it's time to break that vow," she said, and the world seemed to stop. For a moment there was no rain, no gunfire, no past, only two survivors, trying to exist in the same moment. Dante closed his eyes, resting his forehead against hers. His breath was uneven, as if fighting his own heart took more strength than any battle. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside the church, a different fire was rising, one that didn't burn the skin, only the soul. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. What lived between them was stronger, the recognition of two broken halves finding each other in chaos. When the final thunder rolled, Dante opened his eyes and whispered, "From now on, you're not alone." And for the first time, Sophia believed him. The silence that followed felt sacred. The old candles flickered, casting trembling shadows across his face. In the reflection of his tired eyes, Sophia didn't see a criminal. She saw a man trying to be redeemed. Outside, the world was still hunting them, but inside, for a brief and fragile moment, time itself seemed to kneel. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt drenched in fear. The abandoned church slept in silence, and Sophia woke to the distant sound of birds returning to the sky. Dante was already awake, cleaning his gun on the broken altar. His face was the same, calm, composed, but in his eyes there was something new, a kind of exhaustion born not from the body, but from the soul. She watched him in silence, sitting on the cold church steps. She could still feel his touch from the night before, the unspoken confession, the brief warmth, the vow that needed no words. Dante seemed to want to forget, but the air between them still pulsed, alive, uneasy, as if fate hadn't finished writing their story. Sunlight slipped through the cracked windows, cutting the darkness into thin ribbons of gold. Sophia stood slowly, walked closer, and asked, "Where do we go now?" Dante didn't answer. He finished assembling his gun, tucked it under his coat, and finally said, "Wherever he goes. Ricardo won't stop as long as you're breathing." The name made her stomach twist. Ricardo, the memory came like a blade. The man who once said he loved her, the same man who hunted her. Sophia felt the weight of the past drawing near again, like hell itself had learned to drive. Dante looked at her, reading the fear forming in her eyes. "Do you trust me?" he asked. She hesitated. "I trust what I feel." "Then that's enough." They left the church before noon. The road, thick with mud, mirrored the grey sky above. Dante drove carefully, eyes sharp. Sophia watched the trees slide by, her heart tight with a feeling she couldn't name, the quiet sense that danger was closer than ever, and it was. The first sign came as a vibration. Her phone buzzed in her bag. A message, unknown number. Just a few words, "I can set you free." Sophia froze. Dante noticed instantly. "Who is it?" She showed him the screen. No name appeared, but the scent of the past was familiar. She knew exactly who it was. Ricardo. Her blood turned to ice. Her hands trembled, her chest tightening. "He knows I'm alive," she whispered. Dante took the phone and read the message. "Bring the evidence and I'll let you go." His voice hardened. "It's a trap." Sophia shook her head. What if it's real? What if he has something that could end this? Dante slammed on the brakes. The engine went silent. "You still believe him?" he asked, not shouting, but his voice cut like a blade. Sophia looked out at the empty road. "I believe he's capable of anything, and that's what scares me." Dante exhaled. "You're not going alone." But she had already made up her mind. And love, when tangled with fear and guilt, can make people do foolish things. That night, while he slept in the armchair, body heavy with exhaustion, as if fighting destiny itself, Sophia got up. She moved quietly, slipped on her boots, and left his coat folded on the couch, with a note scrawled in shaky handwriting. "I have to finish what I started." The road was cold, the wind dragging dry leaves across the asphalt. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, another address, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. She followed the map, her heart pounding in rhythm with her fear. With every mile, Dante felt further away, but the weight of her choice grew heavier. When she arrived, the place felt dead. Rusted gates, the smell of oil and decay. Broken windows let the moonlight spill in, pale and merciless. She stepped inside, calling his name, Ricardo, but only echoes answered. Then a shadow moved behind her. "You actually came," a voice said. The sound froze her blood. Ricardo stood there, thinner, eyes feverish and wild. "You owe me the life you destroyed." Sophia stepped back. "I only told the truth," he laughed. The laugh of someone who'd lost his mind long ago. "And that's why you'll die with me." Sophia tried to run, but he caught her. Her scream vanished into the hollow air of the warehouse. Ricardo shoved her against a stack of crates, his face twisted with madness. "Dante can't save you this time," but the sound that came next proved him wrong. The roar of an engine cutting through the night like judgment itself. Dante's car crashed through the gate, headlights slicing the darkness. He jumped out before it even stopped, gun already drawn. "Let her go," he shouted. Ricardo pulled Sophia closer, pressing the gun to her temple. "One more step and she dies." Dante froze, his eyes locked on hers, his finger on the trigger, his heart beat a drum of war. The tension hung thick in the air. The wind kicked up dust, shadows breathing like living things. Dante lowered his weapon slightly and took one step forward. "It's me you want, not her." Ricardo laughed, nerves cracking beneath the sound. "I want everything. I want what she took from me." "I want what you took from me," Sophia cried silently, as if she'd already accepted that fate never listens to prayers. Ricardo pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. Dante seized the split second of hesitation and lunged. The two men collided, the sound sharp and brutal. Sophia hit the ground, the world spinning in flashes of light and thunder. When she opened her eyes, they were fighting in the shadows, blood mixing with the first drops of new rain. A single gunshot echoed moments later. Just one. The sound lingered, heavy with everything that had gone unsaid. Dante fell to his knees, his chest heaving. Ricardo lay motionless, his eyes empty, as if even hatred had finally abandoned him. Sophia crawled toward Dante, panic in her voice. "Are you okay?" He was breathing hard, sweat and rain streaking his face. "It's over," he said. But it didn't sound like victory, only exhaustion. "He won't hurt you again." Sophia cupped his face with trembling hands, tears mixing with the rain. Why risk everything for me?" Dante smiled faintly. The kind of smile that comes from someone who's finally understood something about himself. "Because love is the only mistake I never wanted to fix." She held him tight as the rain poured harder, washing away everything, the blood, the pain, the fear. Outside, dawn was breaking again, and between thunder and silence, their destiny rewrote itself, drop by drop, under the same sky that had witnessed their first meeting. The warehouse smelled of iron and rain. The floor was slick with dark puddles that reflected the flickering headlights of the still-running car. The air was heavy, humid, filled with the distant wail of sirens creeping closer. Dante kept his eyes fixed on Ricardo, who now lay slumped against a pile of crates, struggling to breathe. Sophia watched, trembling, like someone staring at a past that had finally begun to bleed itself dry. Dante took a few steps forward, his gun still steady in his hands. "It's over," he said quietly, almost a whisper. But Ricardo laughed, coughing, spitting blood onto the floor. "Over for who, Marino? You think she'll stay with the killer?" The words sliced the air like knives. Sophia looked at Dante for a moment, saw the man torn between rage and love. The sirens grew louder, echoing through thunder and wind. Dante let the gun fall, the clatter of metal ringing through the warehouse. He walked up to Ricardo and knelt before him. "I don't need to kill you," he said, voice firm but cold. "You've already destroyed yourself." Ricardo laughed again, weaker this time. "You're just like me." Dante didn't flinch. "Now I still have someone to live for." Sophia took a step forward, her heart racing. The scene looked like a shattered mirror, two men bound by hatred, separated by her. Lightning flashed, lighting the place for a brief second, the blood mixed with rain. The weary bodies, the end of everything that had once been a threat. Ricardo's body tilted to the side, eyes open as if hell itself had called his name. The rain grew heavier. Dante rose slowly, his hands shaking, his eyes lost in nothing. Sophia ran to him, cupped his face, feeling his skin cold and his body tense. "It's over," she whispered, almost sobbing. "It's done." He drew a long breath, his eyes glassy, though he refused to admit it. "Nothing ever ends, Sophia. It just changes shape." Outside, red lights began to pierce the darkness. Police. Voices shouting orders. Time shrank, and Dante knew what had to be done. He picked up the folder that had fallen near the crates and pressed it into her hands. "Here, the files, transfers, everything he stole. Give it to the police, but don't say my name." Sophia shook her head, panicked. "You can't stay here. They'll arrest you." Dante smiled faintly, the kind of smile from a man who's already lived through every kind of prison. "I was born inside one. This is just another door closing." Her tears came before she could stop them. "Please, come with me." He looked at her the way a man memorizes a face for the last time. "You deserve what I never had. Peace." Sophia reached for him, but he stepped back. The sirens were inside the building now. "Go, Sophia. Now." She hesitated for a heartbeat, but his eyes were both command and plea. She ran. Her footsteps echoed through the storm and chaos outside. Dante stood in the center of the warehouse, watching Ricardo's still body on the floor. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and raised his hands as the armed officers burst in. The shouting, the boots, the orders, all of it sounded far away. Outside, Sophia jumped into the car and sped off, her heart pounding like a war drum. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't stop. Behind her, the warehouse disappeared in flashes of lightning and sirens. Rain pounded the windshield, and every drop seemed to whisper a name: Dante. Hours later, she pulled over on an empty stretch of road. The sky was starting to lighten, the sun breaking through the grey. She opened the folder and saw the papers inside stained with blood and rain, proof that could clear her name and condemn his. Freedom and loss came wrapped in the same package. Sophia looked at the horizon, the wind brushing against her face. "He saved me," she whispered, "and now he's paying for it." Her voice vanished into the air. She reached into her pocket and found the pendant Dante had left in the car, an old worn medal, its engraving nearly erased. "To love is to endure." She pressed it to her chest, breathing deeply, as if promising to keep living. The sun broke fully over the mountains, lighting the wet asphalt. For a moment, the world seemed at peace, as if love, even when stained, still had the power to redeem. Then the rain returned, soft at first. The drops tapped against the hospital window like the sky was crying what she no longer could. Sophia opened her eyes slowly, the white light stinging her weary sight. Her heart ached, not from wounds but from emptiness. Everything felt far away, as if she'd left part of herself behind in that warehouse with him. Machines beeped steadily beside her, reminding her she was still alive. The sheets smelled of disinfectant, and the room was too cold for someone who had come from the storm. She tried to sit up, but pain crossed her chest like a warning. Life went on, even when the soul didn't want to. On the table beside her lay an envelope, folded in 3. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was neat, precise, unmistakable. "You're free now. The world out there is yours, not mine." Dante's words cut through the silence like a knife. Sophia let the letter slip from her fingers and closed her eyes, her breath catching in her throat. What was freedom without him? A nurse came in, adjusted the 4, said something about discharge papers and medication. Sophia barely heard her. The voice sounded far away, like an echo from another life. When she was alone again, she pulled the coat folded at the foot of the bed, the same one he'd left in the car, soaked with rain and goodbye. She pressed the fabric to her face, and for a fleeting second, his scent made her believe it had all been a dream. Outside, the weather still wept. The window fogged, hiding the city. The wind howled between the cracks. Sophia rose slowly, each step echoing on the cold floor. The nurses tried to stop her, but she didn't listen. She walked down the hall, the coat clutched tight to her chest, and pushed open the glass doors. The rain fell on her like baptism, cold, relentless, alive. The air tasted of iron and memory. Sophia crossed the courtyard, her hair plastered to her face, her body too light for someone who had survived hell. She stopped at the edge of the empty street and looked for something she didn't know what. A car, a shadow, a sign, but only the rain answered. Then she saw him. Across the avenue, leaning against the black car gleaming under the rain. Dante. No coat this time, just a dark suit, and that steady gaze fixed on her. The world stopped. No sound, no movement. Only the silent certainty of two souls that still belonged to each other, even if destiny refused to allow it. Sophia took one step, then another, ignoring the traffic, the pain, the storm. But when she reached the middle of the street, he smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. The kind that understands the cost of choice. He took off his jacket and laid it across the car's hood, the movement slow, deliberate. A symbol, a farewell. A promise of protection even from afar. She stopped. His eyes told her everything, that love doesn't have to stay close to keep existing. That sometimes redemption means walking away before the world destroys what's still pure. A car passed between them, breaking the view, and when it was gone, so was Dante. Now there was only rain. Sophia dropped to her knees, the coat slipping from her hands. She cried without fear, without restraint. Cried for everything that could have been, and everything that still would be, even in solitude. The rain drowned her sobs, washing away guilt and longing. On the horizon, the sky began to lighten. Life called again softly, stubbornly. Sophia stood, clutching the coat against her chest, and turned her back on the emptiness. She walked without looking back. Every step a silent promise to keep going, not for him, but for what he had taught her to become. And as the rain kept falling, the world finally felt clean. Months passed since that storm. Time moved like a slow river, carrying memories that refused to sink. Sophia learned to breathe without fear, to sleep without expecting footsteps in the night. The city was different now, and so was she. The shelter she'd built for women on the run grew every week, a place of refuge and rebirth, woven from stories that sounded like her own. At the back of the hall, hanging on the wall, a dark coat served as a reminder. No one knew whose it was. She only said it belonged to a man who once taught her the meaning of the word safe. Sometimes when the wind blew, the fabric swayed gently like time still breathed through it. The nights were still long. Sometimes Sophia found herself sitting by the window, watching the empty street, waiting for something she couldn't name. Her heart no longer hurt, but it didn't forget. In certain silences she could swear she heard the faint sound of an engine. And for a moment the world became rain again. That afternoon the sky threatened another storm. Clouds gathered on the horizon, and the scent of wet earth filled the air. Sophia was closing the windows when she heard it, the subtle sound of an engine pulling up outside the gate. Her heart raced before she could stop it. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the memory, but her hands were trembling. Through the window, she saw a familiar car, black, elegant, impossible to mistake. The door opened and he stepped out. Dante, no suit this time. No mask. No shadow following him. He wore only a simple jacket, his face stripped of war, looking human at last. His eyes still the same, calm, fierce, unforgettable. Sophia froze, as if time itself had forgotten how to move. Memories flooded back all at once. The road, the warehouse, the touch, the rain. Her heart wanted to run, but her body stayed. He walked toward the entrance without hurry, like a man finally coming home after being gone too long. When he stopped in front of her, silence carried more weight than any word could. The space between them held everything they had lived and everything they hadn't. Dante smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only happens once in a lifetime. "I came back," he said, his voice low, sweetly tired. Sophia's chest tightened. "Why?" she asked, tears breaking free. He took a single step closer, eyes locked on hers. This time, not to save you, but to stay. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of every broken promise from before. Sophia laughed through her tears, a fragile, beautiful sound, like someone finally understanding the meaning of pain. Dante reached for her, and for a heartbeat, time stopped again, as if the universe itself bowed before something too pure to rush. Their fingers met. No urgency, just certainty. The rain began to fall again, soft, slow, like the sky blessing their reunion. Dante smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "I tried to run from everything. But love always finds the way." Sophia closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of rain, the warmth of his breath, the peace that time had owed her for so long. And for the first time since it all began, she understood, love isn't the end of pain. It's the reason it's worth enduring. Outside, the world kept spinning, indifferent. But inside that shelter, two hearts finally stopped running. The past dissolved into rain, and the future began there, where love and redemption finally found each other. And what did you think of this story? If it touched you in any way, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me. There are still many more stories of love, danger, and redemption waiting to be told.